Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Thanks so much for being here with us. He's in town, so we're making him work. Joe Heschmeyer in studio with us both hours today. First hour, we're going to talk a bit about the early church. What did early Christians actually believe? And how much can we really know about what they actually believed? And I think of it this way. Joe Heschmeyer, first of all, thanks for being here with us.
Hey, you're welcome.
And the book is called The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. And so perfect. And the second hour, we'll do more of an open forum. Make you work harder.
If you've got early church questions, this is a great hour. If you've got other questions, hold
Second
that thought. Yeah.
But here's what I mean when I say, what did the early church actually believe? I mean, a guy is in the synagogue and he hears somebody preaching about Jesus or whatnot, and he comes to the church. He comes to the Christian, the catechist or the evangelist or whoever's I don't know what jobs they had in those days, or the presbyter or the deacon. I want to be a Christian. Okay, so what would that person have been taught by Christianity? I don't mean what did, because I think sometimes we can get confused and go, well, there was a whole lot of different beliefs. Well, of course there's always a whole lot. Like, go to a Catholic Mass right now, and you ask, what do we believe about, and name a thing, and you're going to get 40 different answers.
Yeah.
If during these COVID times you have 40 people in the church, but. I mean, what would have been taught by the church? But that's what did the church believe? Is that a faulty question even to ask? Like I think
no.
Okay.
I think it's something that people assume that there was actually a much broader diversity of thought. And what I mean there is that you take an issue like baptism, you take an issue like the Eucharist, and I think most Christians, Catholic or Protestant or Orthodox or whatever, maybe have in the back of their mind this idea that things were a little chaotic early on, and that getting like one answer everybody agreed on took a long time. And there are some issues that's actually true on. If you say like which books belong in the Bible, there's a group of books everybody knows belong in the Bible. And then there's a group of books that there's some confusion about. Does the book of Revelation belong? Does Hebrews belong?
Yeah.
Does First Clement belong? Does Shepherd of Hermas belong? Like, you'll find those
two
questions.
Yeses, two no's,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm really good at this game.
I wanted to. You can't do true all the way down. I had to include a few falses to make it harder.
Right.
But there were those questions, right?
Yeah.
Antilogomia, the spoken against book.
Yeah.
Those books, and it's not that those were even bad books. They're good books, but we didn't think they're divinely inspired. Those conversations had to happen. So you find areas that there really was a diversity of, some people are over here, some people are over there. They might debate them out. But on the big issues, and especially on the big issues dividing Catholics and Protestants, it's actually really shocking just how Catholic the early church was, where you are not going to find a person who takes the view that baptism is just a symbol that, saved people get baptized. No, they say baptized people get saved. That baptism actually is how you get saved. That being born again isn't, I made a personal commitment for Jesus. Being born again is God saved me through the washing of rebirth. Baptism, I was saved by water and the Spirit. I was born again by water and the Spirit. Like all of that stuff, it's really remarkable how little variation you're going to find there.
Our number is 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. We're talking about what the early church believed. And I mean early church too, Joe, because I think a lot of people will dispute with that you could even know this. Like, how could Joe Heschmeyer know what the church say of the year? Well, let's say the last apostle died in the year 90. So how could you, Joe Heschmeyer, know what the church believed in the year 91?
Yeah, well, it turns out we actually have writings. So you have, for instance, you have the Didache, which most scholars are going to say it probably dates to the 1st century or early part of the 2nd century. It may be older than some parts of the New Testament. You have the first letter of St. Clement. You have, and that's about 96. You've got the writings of St. Ignatius of Antioch from like 107. And we also know just historically that these letters were preserved and copied, which is a really good indication that these weren't, crazy people just writing their insane ramblings, because we don't see people writing against them. We see people like reading them. And in the case of Clement's letter, the church in Corinth actually includes the papal letter among the things they're reading at Mass as if it's scripture, until they're eventually told to stop doing that.
Yeah, right.
So those kinds of things give us a real sense of what the early Christians believed. Now, you get there's a lot more documentary evidence once you get into the 100s. So one of the things I look at in the book is this idea of what's called living memory. So John dies maybe as late as 100. He has a couple of disciples we know about. Ignatius, who I mentioned, he dies maybe 7 to 10 years later. But his other disciple, Polycarp of Smyrna, he's the bishop of Smyrna, and one of the churches mentioned in Revelation. And like I said, an adult disciple of the Apostle John. He dies in 155. He's martyred at the age of 84. We know about his martyrdom because it's recorded before it's even been a year since he died. Like his martyrdom is a contemporary account. And then we know also that Polycarp had two famous disciples, Florinus, who defects from Christianity and becomes Gnostic, and Irenaeus of Lyon, who writes against heresies in 180. So 180 sounds like a long time after the apostles, but it's not that long in terms of lifetimes. That it's one guy who learned Christianity from a guy who learned it from the apostles.
Yeah.
It's when you think about it that way, it's really like 2 degrees.
Yeah.
It's not that far. It's certainly a lot closer than we are today.
Again, the number 888-318-7884. Joe's most recent book is The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. And the premise of it is exactly what Joe just said, that it's remarkable when you look at the written beliefs and also the kind of archaeological evidence of the earliest Christians, that it looks very, very Catholic. So much so that, and we've talked about this many times, but I'll just repeat it again. Some of the writings in the 19th century from the earliest church were dismissed as forgeries because they were just too Catholic. There's no way that could really be from the early church. But contemporary scholarship has shown, no, actually, these are the earliest writings of Christians.
There's a really fascinating history of this with the letters of Ignatius, which I mentioned before.
Yeah.
John Calvin pretty famously said that these were Catholic forgeries. And
yeah.
And it makes sense. You read them and you're like, this is extremely Catholic.
And without the benefit of modern history and archaeology, he's not lying. I mean, it was a fair thing for John Calvin to propose.
Totally fair. And at the time, during the Renaissance, a lot of things that people in the medieval period had thought were real turned out to be spurious. You know, there were forgeries. So it was not a crazy position for him to take, but it is revealing because it shows that John Calvin thought these were very Catholic. And he thought, Catholics are basically just making up evidence. And then actually Protestant scholars documented them and realized that 7 of the letters ascribed to Ignatius are almost certainly from Ignatius.
Yeah.
And so there's not a big serious scholarly debate now that this what's called the middle declension or middle rescission. They're considered authentic. There were forged Ignatian letters, true.
Yeah.
But the ones that Catholics were relying on to refute John Calvin actually were written by Ignatius. And it shows that his theory about, the corruption of the church slowly setting in can't be true. Either the corruption of the church happened within 7 years, or it just wasn't actually a corruption. It's actually these Catholic teachings are just what the apostle taught.
Yeah, so this is a way of getting insight into what was the life that the apostles themselves invited people into. And was that life a life of a universal priesthood, but also a ministerial priesthood? Was that a life that included a hierarchical church? Was that a life that included sacraments or just signs? And and on all of these things, it was hierarchical, priestly, sacramental.
Yeah. Very much so. There certainly was a respect for the universal call to holiness, as we would now call it. That sense of a baptismal priesthood is a real thing. But there's also no doubt that there was a sense that there was a distinct sacerdotal priesthood. And a clear view that the Old Testament priesthood, high priest, priest, Levite, was a prefigurement of the New Testament priesthood, bishop, priest, deacon.
The number again, 888-318-7884. You don't have to agree with us to call. Anyone's welcome to call. We love talking about this stuff. Joe's book, just a delightful read. And whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're Christian or not, if you have questions about what the early church believed, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. Now, before I go to the break, and then we'll come back and start taking some of these calls, Joe, when you talk about a letter like the letters of Ignatius, I imagine that people might have the same attitude they have about the Gospels, that really, these things got handed down orally for a few hundred years, and then, a few hundred years more, they were being edited and revised. And so by the time you get the finished product of Ignatius's letters, maybe there was a guy named Ignatius, sure, there's a kernel, but these things developed and a myth around Jesus developed. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do. And
so why not?
Bad argument against the scriptures and a bad argument against the letters of Ignatius.
Okay, so tell me why that's not right.
Because it isn't one guy making one copy who then passes it to one guy who makes one copy. It's that these things are mass copied. And so you've got versions in Greek, in Latin, and in Syriac. And so we can compare those. And so if a corruption was made, it had to be made extremely early on while the person's still alive to correct the record. Because after that point, the letter's all over the place. So a later person doesn't have the benefit to come along and fake it. And in fact, this is exactly how we know which parts of the letters of Ignatius were messed with, because we have the unmessed with parts to compare them against.
Right.
The same thing happens with biblical scholarship. They just discovered a manuscript of Deuteronomy that's about 2,000 years old. It's one of the oldest biblical texts that we physically have. And it matches with the current version of Deuteronomy. The whole game of telephone theory of transmission just isn't true. It's not a reliable.
Well, a full copy of the book of Isaiah, for example, from before the time of Christ, from maybe 100 or 200 years before Christ, from Qumran, I believe. Yeah.
So we find these kind of really fascinating things. Now, it's true. You'll sometimes find variations.
Oh, sure.
And so in those, in the same way that if you found different versions of a conversation, you'd probably be able to reconstruct pretty accurately what the original conversation was like, including just finding people who you would say, well, that person's not reliable. They're not presenting that conversation accurately. Like, scholars do that kind of that textual reconstruction is real work. So it isn't just like everyone copied everything perfectly. It's like we can compare the seemingly reliable copies against the less reliable seeming copies, and we do that regularly.
888-318-7884, the number. I got to take a break. Joe, you read the first ad for me yesterday, so I'm going to read the first ad today.
That sounds good to me.
Carrie just, he writes these up for me, and then I got to read them. Talk with Joe about the new book. Let listeners know they can save for. Oh, it's not an ad. He's telling me what to do. Joe, you got a new book. The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, and people can save $4 off it right now at shop.catholic.com. What do you think of that?
That sounds good. Do I have a part I'm supposed to say in response?
It doesn't say Joe has any part. It just says chat with. I'm talk to Joe, so you're supposed to just ad lib.
Okay. Well, I do have a new book. The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. I hope people will enjoy it, and they've got a little taste of some of the themes we explore from the conversation so far.
$4 off right now at shop.catholic.com.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
EWTN Global Catholic Network is the largest religious media network in the world. 11 global TV channels, English and Spanish radio networks with over 500 AM and FM radio affiliates, one of the largest Catholic websites in the world, dozens of podcasts every week, social media, electronic and print news services, and EWTN Publishing. EWTN is the Global Catholic Network. For more about EWTN, visit EWTN.com.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Joe Heschmeyer, our guest, both hours today. Just one of the best apologists in the world. The former proprietor of Shameless Popery. That's where most people know you from, probably, Joe. But I say former, but you're still doing it. It's just that
it's kind of on life support. I do a lot more stuff for Catholic.com now, and a lot of times I'm just kind of, presenting their stuff I've published elsewhere.
And you're doing a lot of work for us on our podcast, Catholic Answers Focus, as well.
It's true.
Are you recording one with us this week?
I think I'm recording next week.
Next week, and it's going to be on.
I love when you ask me scheduling conversations on the air, both because it's terrible radio,
Remember the time we
and
talked
because I'm really bad at knowing my schedule without
It's
looking it up.
me asking questions nobody cares about, and you not knowing the answer to them.
Exactly.
You don't think that's scintillating?
What's your social security number, Si?
Let me just tell you right now. It's no, I don't want to tell you my social security number. I'm because I don't. I let my okay, now moving on. But the reason I said that is I was going to promote the Focus podcast. It wasn't empty chatter.
Oh, yes.
CatholicAnswersFocus.com. It's our weekly
We've
podcast.
got some exciting things we brainstormed to talk about, and I hope that the
And
final
neither of us can
products
remember what they will
are
be.
as good as whatever we talked about, because we were very excited in our conversations.
All right, you call it CatholicAnswersFocus.com is where you can go. Call it line 1 or 2.
Let's do line 1.
Really? Line 1. Starting with line 1. Joe Heschmeyer going out on a
The
on
first
a limb
shall
here.
be first.
The first shall be first. Yeah, that's completely not biblical. All right. Let's see who we got on line 1. Let's go to Tom in Detroit, Michigan, listening on Ave Maria Radio. Tom, thanks for your call. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Yeah, I was curious. When did priests start wearing vestments? Chasuble, the alb, the stole?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of the vestments that you see were basically old school Roman nice clothing. So think about it this way. Like a lot of Protestant pastors who issue vestments will just wear like a shirt and tie because those are like the nice clothes of our day. But even among us, like we're kind of seeing a cultural shift away from shirt and tie. You know, like 50 years ago on the air, I would probably be wearing a tie with this shirt. Probably not wearing plaid, also like a solid colored shirt and a tie. And, you know, maybe 50 years from now, we'll be wearing like a polo and then a T-shirt or, you know, whatever. And so the idea is like as cultural fashion norms changed, the nice clothes that priests wore kind of stayed the same. So up until maybe the 4th century, priests would just be wearing nice clothes of the day. And they became distinctively clerical once the rest of the fashion culture kind of moved forward. They also started to, at that point, make these particularly clerical modifications to the clothes. But a lot of what we think of as like priestly clothes, especially like the Roman collar and all of that, a lot of that stuff's actually much younger than we realize.
Oh, okay. Because you see, like the bishops, I'm going to say in the 2nd, 3rd century, they're wearing what looked like very similar to what bishops wear today.
Yeah. So my understanding of like the mitre, the hat that a bishop wears, is that some kind of hat was a symbol of authority, but the particulars of it kind of evolve over time. And so you'll see different forms of headdress, so to speak, in the East and the West. And then also like what the Pope wears, the little white skull cap called the zucchetto. That, I believe, is originally Jewish. It's kind of like the kippah is what it's called in Judaism. So you can, but a lot of that stuff does change kind of over the centuries. These are not the kind of these are not the parts of the faith that are, you know, immutable. That kind of stuff could change in the future as well.
Tom, thank you very, very much. Lots of folks on the line. As a matter of fact, every line full. And the question of the hour, what did the early church believe? Jeffrey in Hawaii, watching on YouTube. Are you in Honolulu, Jeffrey?
Yes, sir. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How do you listen in Honolulu?
I'm actually listening on YouTube.
Okay, I see. I gotcha. All right, Jeffrey, go ahead with your question for Joe.
Well, so my question is, I'm a former Seventh-day Adventist. I've been a Catholic since 2010, and I'm so glad to be home. But my question to you is, when speaking or when I debate with other Seventh-day Adventists, they talk about when we die, and I used to believe the same thing, that when you die, you go to sleep until Christ comes again, which I believe is called soul sleep. But what did the early church fathers teach and believe about our soul? What happens to us when we die? Do we go to purgatory? Do we move on to another place, or is our soul sent to God?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The easiest answer to that is to kind of break it up. Even in Judaism before Christianity, there was a belief in something like purgatory. And we have indications of that in like the prayers said in Jewish liturgy for the dead. Like when you sit Shiva, you pray for the dead. And there's a really fascinating article in the Jewish Encyclopedia, which is available online, that looks at Jewish views of purgatory. They're somewhat different than the Catholic view, but they're not they're closer to the Catholic view than I would say they are to the Orthodox view or to the Protestant view. The Orthodox view is also closer to the Catholic view than it is to the Protestant view. The idea of some sort of intermittent period or some sort of purgative or purification process. You also find evidence of this in the Talmud and places where it talks about those who die with some sort of purification needed. So that's kind of the backdrop, that people converting to Christianity from Judaism, it isn't like they suddenly started believing in a purgation. It's like they already had some belief in that. And so we can see evidence of this in Scripture itself, not getting out until you've paid the last penny, that kind of language when Jesus talks about that, or in Luke 16 in the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. That's one of the clearest negations of soul sleep. It's this idea that there's a rich man and a poor man named Lazarus. They both die. Neither of them are just asleep in a state of unconsciousness. We're told in Luke 16:22, the poor man died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried, and in Hades, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus in his bosom. So neither of them are in a state of soul sleep, neither the one who died in a state of righteousness, nor the one who died outside of a state of righteousness, the one who's in suffering now. So those are kind of the original beliefs. Now, you'll find a handful of early Christians who do argue for something like soul sleep. This was never the majority view, and the reason it wasn't the majority view is because it's not what Scripture teaches. We can talk about the body being asleep in the grave, but when we talk about the person being asleep, we don't mean their soul, we do mean their body. That they're not unconscious. They're able to do things like, as we saw in Luke 16, have a conversation, which they proceed to do after both of them are, dead.
Okay, Jeffrey?
Very interesting. Well, that answers my question. Thank you so very much, sir.
Yeah, and welcome home, by the way.
Yes, very much. I'm glad to be home.
Praise God for that, Jeffrey. Thank you. All right, let's go to Janelle in Topeka, Kansas. How far is that from your house?
It's
Topeka,
an
Kansas?
hour, exactly.
Like walking, or people always assume that. All right, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio, Janelle, go ahead with your question for Jill.
Well, I used to live about an hour away from Topeka, so now I'm a little curious where he's from.
I live in Lenexa now, so.
Oh, my brother lives there.
Oh, nice. We could have an even more esoteric conversation now than with Cy and I always have.
This is better than, you two just go on. Don't worry
Kansas
about the rest
suburban
of us.
geography. Aren't the Chiefs great, by the way?
No, moving on. We're not talking about the Chiefs.
Yes,
No.
they are. But my question is, so I was listening to a podcast that's called The Early History of the Church. And
Wow.
it's very interesting. It's really good, and it's supposed to be from like 50 AD to like 451 AD. And it's super interesting, but the guy keeps saying James, the brother of Jesus. And I'm very confused because I don't recall
Yes.
this being a thing. Is this just a Protestant view, or is this a Catholic view? I've never
No,
heard
it's
that
a great
specified
question.
before.
You will find language about James, the brother of Jesus, in Scripture, but Catholics are very clear that Mary is perpetually a virgin. So then you're, okay, so how can both of those things be true? And the short answer is the way Jews use the term brother at the time was much looser. So, for instance, in Genesis, they refer to Abraham and Lot, who are uncle and nephew, as brother. They don't have a separate word in Hebrew for uncle, for nephew, for cousin. So any of those kind of relationships are all called brother, in the same way that you say father for Father Abraham, even if he's a great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, because they don't have they had a very limited relational vocabulary. So that's the first thing to know. The second thing to know is there is James and Joseph are two people who are explicitly described as being brothers of Jesus in Mark 6:3 and in Matthew 13:55 and 56. But we also know that James and Joseph have a different mother. So at the crucifixion, Matthew 27, it mentions Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, as someone watching the crucifixion from afar, while Mary, the mother of Jesus, is at the foot of the cross. So we know they have a different mother. They clearly don't have the same father, since Jesus doesn't have an earthly father. So they're not brothers in the sense we would use that term. The apostles, James, we know the two of them. One is the son of Zebedee, one's the son of Alphaeus. So they don't have the same mother, they don't have the same father. Clearly, these are not brothers in the sense we would use the term. They're probably cousins. There's a long-standing tradition that says this James is the son of Joseph's brother. Does that make sense? So probably Clopas or Cleopas is his name, based on the parallel accounts about James and Joseph. So this is almost certainly the cousin of Jesus. But because there's not a word for that in Hebrew, you just call him the brother of Jesus.
Okay, and I see that because I feel like this was also the same one where they talked about, or maybe I read this recently, I can't remember now, where they said that Joseph had kids before he married Mary, and I was like, that.
Let's get that one when we come back, because the music's playing. We got to take a quick break. But all right, we'll talk about Joseph's possible other children right after this. Most of us Catholic parents agree our number one goal in life is to pass on the faith to our children. But here's the bad news. Today's world has a million ways to steal your kid's soul. Don't be afraid, says Father Sebastian Walsh. God loves your children even more than you do, and He desires their salvation more than anything. In his groundbreaking new book, Always a Catholic, Father Walsh shows you how to cooperate with God to bring about the fulfillment of His will for your kids. Always a Catholic reminds us that keeping our kids in the faith is about the way we live our Catholicism in our own lives and as a family from day to day. Order your copy of Always a Catholic by visiting shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. It's free, and you'll have instant access to our daily broadcast, the schedule of upcoming shows, and you'll even be able to search the archive and listen to thousands of past shows. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Tomorrow on More to Life, spiritual struggles.
Are challenges in your life impacting your faith? We'll help you find healing.
That's tomorrow on More to Life. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Catholic Answers doesn't have to be Catholic questions. If you got a question from another perspective, maybe you're not a Catholic, but you're a fellow Christian, maybe you're not a Christian.
I thought you were going to suggest they didn't have to be questions. Like, just you can make some Catholic statements.
Oh, you just want to call up and say, yes, right. Just shout out a statement. Pope Pius X is a saint. Well, thank you for sharing. We got on the line Janelle, and her follow-up question had to do with Joseph possibly having children before marrying Mary. I got that right, Janelle?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's two views of this, and either view is acceptable to hold as a Catholic. Eastern Christians, Eastern Orthodox, Eastern Catholics tend to take the view you just described, that some of the people called brothers of Jesus are actually half-brothers, that maybe Joseph was an older man who was a widower, and these were his previous children. There's a lot of influences of what's called the Proto-Evangelium of James, these non-canonical writings that tell stories about this. And that's one of the influences. In the West, the Proto-Evangelium was rejected as not reliable. And so we tend to think Joseph was a younger man. and that the people called brothers were cousins. But you're totally free as a Catholic to believe he was older or younger. You're totally free to believe that these brothers are half brothers from, really step brothers from Joseph, or that they are cousins. The one thing the church is clear on is Mary doesn't biologically have any other children, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the things the church fathers look at, a really surprising passage, is Ezekiel 44. The last 8 chapters of Ezekiel are this temple prophecy, and the temple, we're told, is Jesus. I mean, we're told that in the New Testament, places like John 2 and other parts of John where Jesus applies these temple prophecies to himself. But around the temple, there was a temple gate that was to remain closed because the Lord himself had passed through it. And the early church fathers saw in that a reference to Mary, that she is the temple gate. She surrounds the temple, and because the Lord passes through her, she doesn't have any other children after that. That she's sanctified in the original sense of being set aside for God in a kind of unique way. So that's what we believe. That doesn't tell us whether the so-called brothers are cousins or step-siblings, but I think the fact that the ones we know of have other fathers and other mothers is a pretty good indication that they're cousins.
Janelle, I'm going to leave it there because all the lines are full. We're talking about the early church. What did the early church actually believe? And if you got questions maybe about how we could know that, those questions welcome as well. Ethan in Cincinnati, Ohio, watching on YouTube. You're next, Ethan. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hey, God bless you too. How are you doing, Joe Heschmeyer?
Doing very good. How are you doing, Ethan?
Okay, so my question for you on the early church fathers is, when it comes to more educated Protestants, they tend to be more like, they tend to engage with the church fathers and all that kind of stuff. And, they'll quote, some of them will quote church fathers like there's no tomorrow. But how do they ignore the ones that prove, like the papacy or apostolic succession? Wouldn't that at least push them towards, at the very least push them towards Eastern Orthodoxy? At least some hierarchy.
It's a great question. I feel like that may be a better question towards those Protestants, because I'm as befuddled as you, to be totally frank with you. That how do you read them and not believe what you're reading? If you think they're reliable on really technical issues like Christology, how do you not think they get a basic issue like what does baptism do, or what's the structure of the church? Because that seems like the easier stuff. If I don't trust you to get the easy stuff right, I shouldn't trust you to get the hard stuff right. If I do trust you to get the hard stuff right, I should probably trust you to get the easy stuff right. So that's certainly my own view of the church fathers. Like, if you're going to trust them on all this other stuff, why not trust them on these issues? Like, what is the Eucharist? What is baptism? What is the church? I say, easy, hard, not important, unimportant. These are really big issues, but they're ones that like everybody seems to be coming to the same answers on, which suggests that the early Christians didn't find these to be difficult questions. So I think, you're right to ask that question, especially like, is there a bishop in every church? The early Christians are unanimous on that. What does baptism do? They're unanimous. The nature of the Eucharist, they're unanimous. On these issues, I think there is a lot of cherry picking among our Protestant brothers and sisters. Well, they'll take passages they agree with, and I think to do them justice, they would say something like this: well, the early church fathers aren't infallible. They make mistakes sometimes. And that's totally true. But the idea that all of them make a mistake and all of them make a mistake in the same direction is when it starts to strain credulity, I would suggest. What do you think of that, Ethan?
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right.
Because I'll see them quote from a council or whatever, one of the 7 early councils, where and they'll agree with the Christology and how it describes the Trinity, but they'll ignore clear assertions of papal primacy, stuff like Philip the Legate, or something like the Tome of Leo or something.
Well, I'll give you one even maybe more obvious. The 7th of the 7 ecumenical councils, the chief thing they're dealing with is the appropriate veneration of images. It isn't like a passing byline. Like, the whole point of the council is that we should offer dulia to images. We should offer honor to images, and that it passes on to the saint that we're honoring. And almost every Protestant actually rejects that. Even as they pay lip service to the 7 ecumenical councils, almost none of them actually agree with the 7th of the 7 ecumenical councils.
Ethan, thanks. Thanks very, very much. Appreciate the call. Every line continues full. Everybody wants to talk about the beliefs of the early church. The early church was the Catholic Church. That's Joe Heschmeyer's book. You are welcome to call, especially if you disagree. I do want people who disagree or have another take to feel welcome to call. Angel now in Des Moines, Iowa, listening on Iowa Catholic Radio. Angel, go ahead with your question for Joe.
How you doing, fellas?
Very well.
My question is, nice. My question is, when do we start to see the early church being called Catholic? By which fathers can we, see that? I know Ignatius of Antioch is one of them.
Yeah, Ignatius is the very first one that we have records of in his letter to the Smyrnians, chapter 8. Again, this is about 107. He says, wherever Jesus Christ is, there's the Catholic Church. And so we see other people use Catholic Church after that, but he's the first.
He says wherever Jesus Christ is, there's the Catholic Church?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm not arguing with the point. I just didn't remember the line that way.
Yeah, the full sentence is, wherever the bishop shall appear, there let the multitude be. Even as wherever Jesus Christ is, there is the Catholic Church.
Oh, yeah, that was the bishop part that threw me off. All right, Angel, that satisfies you?
That satisfies me.
God bless you, brother. Thank you very, very much. Boy, moving right through, but the lines stay full. Vicky in the Poconos in Pennsylvania, listening on the TuneIn app. Glad to have you, Vicky. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hi, I listen to the show every night, and I absolutely love it. No buts. Absolutely love it.
Oh, no buts. So you heard yesterday's show where I was waiting for the butt. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Vicky.
I do listen.
Yeah.
My question is twofold, same subject. I just wonder why absolutely none of these letters that the apostles wrote from jail exist anywhere in any bit or form, like nothing has ever been found. And secondly, if they were also in a prison in Rome and all these places that were known for their horrific punishments, why would they let them write?
So let me do both halves of those questions. The first is we do have prison letters of St. Paul. Scholars debate which of the letters of Paul, but almost certainly some of those were written while he is in prison.
Could I interrupt you for a quick second? Vicky, did you mean the original manuscript? Or did you? Yes.
Whatever he wrote on.
Yeah, like Paul wrote on the vellum
I'm sorry. You mean like the papyrus or something like that?
Yeah.
In terms of the preservation of papyri, not just the ones in jail, but just in general, a lot of first century papyrus just falls apart over time. So we have the copies, and the big determinant about whether a copy survives 2,000 years is whether the environment in which it's in is humid or not. And so a lot of the stuff we have is stuff that gets stored in caves in places like Egypt and in Israel, where you have a dry, cool climate inside the cave, and that's really good for preservation. Stuff that's being like handled and passed around and goes from place to place, it starts to disintegrate over time.
Okay.
But yeah, we do have some of the jail letters, just obviously copies of the original. And then as for why the Romans allowed this stuff to happen, this is a question that comes up with Ignatius too, because all of his letters are written while he's on his way to his martyrdom. But the Romans were economical. You might even say cheap. And so they didn't want to pay for feeding prisoners. So they would allow good-natured citizens to come and feed the prisoners for them. This is one of the reasons why Jesus talks about visiting the imprisoned, because if we didn't take care of those who are awaiting trial, they could just die. Like they could just starve because the Romans aren't going to provide a budget for feeding a bunch of criminals or suspected criminals. And so because of that, this actually creates a really nice avenue where you can converse with these people, you can share ideas with them, you can pass letters off to them. They just didn't seem to have the same kind of concerns about contraband letters that maybe we would have today.
Hey, makes sense to me.
Great. Happy to hear you say it.
Thanks for starting out with those kind words. Thank you very, very much. That actually it means a great deal.
Oh, no, I love the show, and I even have like books I've bought from the show, everything. Yep, love it.
Any thoughts on who reads ads better, me or Joe, or no feelings about that?
There's a third one.
What's the third one? Edgar?
Aiken?
Edgar.
Oh, Aiken, Jimmy Aiken?
Yeah,
oh, no,
I don't even disagree. She's right.
All right, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Thanks, Vicki.
Hang on, we'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
I don't like looking back. I prefer to look forward and keep moving forward. There's plenty to cover. I do a lot of research and try to dig out the bits and pieces of a life or of an agenda that people don't want to talk about.
The World Over with Raymond Arroyo. Thursday night, 8 Eastern on EWTN Radio and Television.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. Our good friend and colleague, Joe Heschmeyer, is out here in California with us for a little while. It was an excellent choice on your part to leave Kansas in the winter and not the summer.
I was just say it was not a coincidence.
Was that a plan? We're talking about Joe's book, The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, and if you have questions about what did the earliest Christians believe, you're welcome to call. I got one actually that I didn't get to yet. But if we get a lull for a second, I'm going to ask you my question. I'll prime it for you right now. Did the early Christians have a cross to represent Jesus or a crucifix?
That's a good question.
All right, so we'll get to that if we get to if you have to get to everybody else, you can get to my question then.
All right.
Jerry in Shelton, Connecticut, listening on the pretty new, just in the last couple of years, opened up Veritas Catholic Radio. We're so happy to be there in Connecticut. And thank you to all those who supported Veritas Catholic Radio. Jerry, go ahead with your question.
How you doing, guys?
Good.
Calling you again. I didn't get much through Joe's book yet that you sent me. I don't know. But,
you haven't worked your way through it?
No, I haven't. I had the eye infection. I called a few weeks ago, but I'm getting better. And the question I have is dealing with the Eucharist. As we know that, at the Last Supper, Jesus instituted the Eucharist. And over the years, when did the lay people, the Gentiles, so forth and so on, start receiving the bread as the Eucharist? And also, I heard not too long ago that I guess you were obligated only to receive at Easter the Eucharist, and that tied in with Lent, so forth and so on. What exactly changed where we receive is, if you're in state of grace more often? That's kind of my question.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. There's a few dimensions to that. The so-called Easter duty is established at the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 in Canon 21 of the Council. That is still a duty that the Church imposes upon Catholics, that you need to receive communion at least once a year at Easter time. This is one of what's called the precepts of the Church. You can read about it in paragraph 2042 in the Catechism. It is the third precept of the Church. You shall receive the sacrament of the Eucharist at least during the Easter season. Now, that's not like setting an upper limit. That's setting a lower limit. The reason at the time is in the 13th century, a lot of people were so worried about receiving unworthily that they just wouldn't receive at all. And so people might receive at their baptism, or if they were a convert, or on their wedding day, and then just go years and years and years without receiving communion. And that's clearly not what Christ intends. He wants regular reception of the sacrament. And so St. Pius X really encouraged Catholics to receive more often. And we really see, starting with the Easter duty, that's part of the Church's push to get people to, if you're worried about being in a state of sin, go to confession and then receive Jesus in the Eucharist. So there's a concerted, push. Obviously, there's a lot that's going on between 1215 and the early 1900s when Pius X is doing that. But it is a process of trying to get Catholics to receive more frequently, worthily, of course, but more frequently. So the laity were always able to receive, but in many cases they didn't, and maybe the bar to receive was higher than it should be. Priests trying to police to make sure people aren't receiving unworthily may have over-policed and discouraged people who should have been able to go up from receiving. We find even in Justin Martyr a description of what needs to happen to be able to receive. He talks about how you need to be baptized, you need to be living as the church teaches, and you need to believe what the church teaches. So that's still what's necessary, to be a Catholic, baptized, in a state of grace, and then you're good to go.
Good, Jerry?
Very good. That makes sense. Thank you so much.
Good. I'm happy to hear your eye is better. You can now, I think, critique your brother's eye.
Oh,
right. I got to take the log out of mine first.
Oh, man. Joe.
I can't help myself. I can't stop.
I don't even know what to say, Joe. The jokes are... well, let's go to Eric in
Quantity.
Boca Raton, Florida. Doesn't that sound good right now? Boca Raton, Florida. Watching on YouTube. Hi, Eric. You there?
Yes. Hey, I'm a big fan. I have two kind of questions. So this is so basically the first one is, have we ever seen historically in the church like the pausing of the Mass we saw in 2020 because of like a pandemic? And then do the bishops and the Pope even like have that authority to all of a sudden say there's no Sunday obligation? Because it feels like we're almost buying into the idea that physical health is more important than spiritual health.
Yeah, this is a really good question that gets asked, I think, a fair amount. I think a lot of Catholics were really shocked by everything beginning with 2020. The short answer is there were restrictions somewhat on the Mass during the Middle Ages with the plague. You have people like St. Charles Borromeo who provided outdoor Masses so that people could at least see the Mass and celebrate that way. But at the same time, things like the germ theory of disease, that didn't exist until like the 1800s. So the idea of like understanding how disease was transmitted, all of that, that's much later. So for a lot of reasons, people didn't really get how disease spread. But you did have people who were quarantined off. I mean, quarantine is not a new word. It comes from, I believe, the city of Venice, and it just means 40 days. And so there'd be a 40-day period where you were separated from everyone else. The idea of quarantining everyone, which is sort of what happened, that's new in terms of scale. But the idea of travelers and the like, people who were suspected of carrying disease being quarantined for 40 days, that had happened before. As for the ability of the church to do that, the church does have the ability. We can talk about that in two senses. One, there is an ability to dispense from the Sunday obligation. And in fact, there's a standing dispensation from the Sunday obligation for grave matter. So if you're sick, or if there's a snowstorm, or if the nearest Mass is like 4 hours away from you, those kind of things, even in normal times, you were dispensed from the Sunday obligation. You're dispensed in the sense of Mass attendance. You're not dispensed in terms of keeping the Sabbath holy. You still need to honor God and treat that as a day of rest and worship, but you don't have to physically attend Mass when it's impossible or unreasonable. So the church does have that authority. The trickier question is not just dispensing with the Sunday obligation, but actually making the Sunday obligation impossible by refusing to allow the laity to attend Mass, which is what happened. You would have priests and maybe a handful of people working in the church who could go to Mass, and everyone else could watch it on TV. That's a trickier question. You're going to find people disputing. But I think even in those cases, the canon law says the faithful have a right to the sacraments, provided that the normal conditions are met, and there's not a good reason for them not to. The whole question is going to come down to whether there's a good reason not to. And of course, people are going to disagree on that.
Eric, thanks very, very much. Hope that was helpful to you. Lines continue to stay full. We're going to have Joe with us the second hour, however. So if we don't get to your question by the top of the hour, we will get to you next hour. And it's more open forum next hour. You can ask whatever you want. This hour, we're talking about the beliefs of the early church. And we're going now to Tara in Point St. Lucie, Florida, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Tara, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Yes.
My question is, when it talks about it in the Apostles' Creed, where Jesus descends to hell, when he comes back, does he bring any souls with him?
Yes, he does. Great question, Tara. He opens the gates of heaven. So all those who died before Christ opens heaven, they weren't in hell. They're in what's called the bosom of Abraham. I quoted earlier in the hour, Luke 16, in which Jesus tells the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. And Lazarus is described as being in the bosom of Abraham. This is sometimes called the limbo of the fathers. And it's just like the place of rest that's not full experiencing of the beatific vision, because that is basically the deeper answer is this. A person who lives a faithful life doesn't deserve to go to hell for eternity, but they also don't deserve heaven because they haven't earned heaven in any sense. Jesus gives them something they don't deserve through grace. And that's a gift that he accomplishes for us through the cross on Good Friday. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Cool, Tara. Father Hugh used to say Holy Saturday was the happiest day in the history of the earth up to that time because so many souls went to heaven.
Yeah, so 1 Peter 3 talks about Jesus descending to those in hell to preach. Now, hell in that sense does not mean the hell of damnation. It means, this bosom of Abraham, this limbo.
No, Hades, the hell of damnation would be Tartarus, right?
Yeah. Sometimes Hades is used for it too. Let's go to line 4.
We just talked to line 4.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go to line 5. I'm bad at this. Sorry. This is why you have a job.
Jason in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, listening to EWTN, also on on Sirius XM Satellite Radio, Channel 130. Jason, we're glad to have you. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Thank you, Father. Well, I'm actually an Anglican, so we're kind of arch enemies.
Are you a Steelers fan too? No.
Wait, there's lots of people we like less than Anglicans. You're not our arch enemy.
I'm a lifelong 49er fan.
Okay. We are arch enemies, but not for the reason you've given.
Yeah, I know. That's another show.
Yeah, amen.
My question is, so a lot of the early church fathers, which the Catholic Church take tradition on, I read up on them, and a lot of them are like the first century. You don't see anything between the cross and the first century for confirming that. But why if the Catholic Church was the early church, like after Christ, after the day of Pentecost, how come we don't see the gifts of the Spirit operating like it was during the Acts of the Apostles?
Oh, that's a great question, Jason. I guess there's two parts to that question. One is there's a very unique outpouring of the Holy Spirit that happens on Pentecost. That we don't even see that kind of outpouring at the same kind of level after that, even in Acts. So you've got 3,000 people converting on one day. The next day, you don't have 3,000 people converting. These are special graces given for special occasions. And, as Jesus says, the Holy Spirit blows where he will. Like he's gonna show up where he wants to show up. And so you have these special outpourings of the Holy Spirit in the beginning to kind of launch the fire. And then it doesn't look the same after that. So some of the special gifts, some of the special miracles, those sorts of things appear to be for the first century to really launch things in a big way and to get things going. But the second half of that is that they don't go away. They certainly diminish in frequency. But you can find, St. Gregory the Wonder Worker is one of the church fathers who is pretty famous as a miracle worker. You can find down through the ages people who have all these different gifts of the Holy Spirit. St. Francis Xavier, who converts thousands and thousands and thousands of people, maybe baptized more people than anyone else in human history. He could speak in tongues. He would go to new lands and speak the native language that he'd never encountered before. Those kind of gifts happen. They tend to happen in these particular contexts. The apostolic age is a particular context. The preaching of the gospel for the first time in a new land is a particular context. I think that's probably the answer, but I don't know the mind of the Holy Spirit better to give you a clear answer on that.
And we got to leave it there, but thank you very, very much for the call, Jason. Appreciate it. Hey, if you're on the line, hang on the line. We're coming back. A couple minutes, we'll be back answering more questions. And we'll open this conversation up. We can continue to talk about the early church as much as you'd like, but if you have other questions that you would like to ask, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. We like, and as much as we joke with Jason, we like Anglicans. We like talking with Anglicans. We like Protestants. We like Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, atheists, agnostics. Just not 49ers fans? Is that what you're saying? All right.
I mean, we try to love them.
We love them. If you don't like someone, you can still love them. All right, we're just kidding. 888-318-7884. Right back. Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. We'll open it up a little bit, talk about anything you want, but we got still some folks on the line with questions about what the early church believed. And you can have, if you got more of those, you can call on that, but you can call on anything else as well. 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Joe, thanks for coming back for the second hour.
Do my best.
I know you're not good at schedules, but I'm glad you remembered that you're supposed to be here for the second hour. Do you want to tell me, want to boss me around like you did last hour about what line to go to, or should I just?
No, just
I can choose
dealer's choice. Let's go to line 3.
Dealer's choice. All right, dealer's choice. Let's go to line 3.
It's a tough one.
Fine, that's fine. Thomas in Fort Wayne, Indiana, watching on YouTube. You're up next. Thomas, go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hi, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Happy to.
I was wondering, what is the difference between a profession of faith and a confession of faith? And specifically, what brings this to my mind is the old translation in the English of the creed where we would say, I acknowledge one baptism for the forgiveness of sins, but then this was rendered, I guess, more like literally to confession. And so I'm just wondering, like, etymologically, like, what's the distinction between the two, and why confession? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Try to go over all the pros and cons on this one, will you?
Oh, that's a really bad pun.
Thank you. That was a Joe Heschmeyer joke.
That was a
Joe Heschmeyer joke.
Quality level
otherwise known as a
joke.
bad joke.
Yes, exactly.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so the first thing is, why did we switch the translation to confess instead of acknowledge or whatever? Is because confiteor. It was a bad translation before. Confiteor just means I confess. It's right there. I mean, even the name sounds similar. The word confess comes from confiteor, from confessare, which is also confiteor is a form of that. So the translation was to make it literally I confess, but the idea is that there's something more solemn than just I acknowledge that. Like, if you make a confession of faith, you're making an avowal or an admission of it literally. And so we use it in context of confessing a crime or a sin or a debt, but also confessing a faith. Like, there's a gravity to that acknowledge doesn't have. Saying like, oh yeah, I acknowledge that. That's different than, oh yeah, I confess that. Profess is a very close synonym to confess. They're the same root. The fetare, the fess is from fetare, but instead of con, it's a per or pro, like to confess forth, basically. And that originally was in the context of taking a vow. So you have a religious profession where you're not just confessing the faith, you're actually making a promise, you're making a vow. So there's a subtle difference between those two things. You have a religious confession when you say what you believe in a solemn kind of way. You have a religious profession when you're making a religious promise or vow. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much for your help.
Oh, yeah,
sure. Thank you, Thomas. Do you want to tell me what number to go to?
No,
I feel like
you do.
You have no idea how insecure I am in my job. I got two things. I say hello and I push a button. And if you take that away from me, Heschmeyer, someone's going to figure out they don't need me around here. All right, I'm going to Patrick in Central Pennsylvania, watching on YouTube. Patrick, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Yes, thank you all very much for taking my call. I have a two-part question about the filioque controversy that I'll try to ask very quickly. And it's about two of Aquinas' arguments that he made for the filioque way that I'm trying to understand but kind of wrestling with. And two of those arguments, at least from my understanding, is first one that the temporal mission of the Holy Spirit must be reflective of the eternal origin of the Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess where I'm wrestling with that is, there's a sense in which even Christ is begotten of the Spirit in regards to his manhood in the womb of the Blessed Virgin Mary, but we wouldn't say that means that the Son is begotten of the Spirit from eternity past.
True.
And then the second argument. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, yeah, you're right. He is eternally begotten, but not of the Spirit. Yeah.
Yes. And I guess my second question about one of Aquinas' arguments for the filioque is that without it, we're not able to distinguish between the second person of the Trinity and the third person of the Trinity. But wouldn't that render the etymology of begotten or generation and procession or spiration useless?
I think that would be the counter. So let's unpack that for those who maybe haven't been following Aquinas' arguments on the Filioque a little bit. The idea is Jesus, is the Holy Spirit, does he proceed from the Father through the Son? And in the older languages, the Father and the Son. The clarification that we've had in kind of dialogues with the East is that when we say that the Holy Spirit is spirated from the Father and the Son, we don't mean the Father and the Son together breathe him out, but that the Father breathes the Holy Spirit through the Son. And so that's an important distinction in a couple ways. The way we differentiate people normally is at a physical level, through matter. That doesn't work for the three persons of the Trinity. That's not how they're differentiated because they're not material. Of course, the Son takes on a human nature, but in his divinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are not material, persons. So how are they distinguished? Well, they're distinguished through what's called relation. The Father is Father, the Son is Son. The Son is begotten of the Father. The Father is the one who does the begetting. That's how we can distinguish the first person from the second person. The two things that distinguish the third person are first that he's spirated, as you said, rather than begotten. But then second, Aquinas is going to say that he is spirated from the Father through the Son, not from the Father alone, because begetting and spirating are virtually indistinguishable in terms of our kind of experience of them. It would be very hard to distinguish between the Son and the Spirit were this not the case. The other thing, as you mentioned, is that the earthly experience we have of Father, Son, and Spirit reveals their inner life. Like, we don't have direct access to the inner life of the Father, Son, and Spirit, but what we see of them suggests this reality. We see the Son breathing the Holy Spirit upon the apostles. We see the Son saying that he will send the Spirit he'll go to the Father, have the Father send the Spirit. That appears to be the Spirit proceeding from the Father and the Son, which certainly supports the Catholic view of this question. Does that help at all, Patrick?
Yes. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, you are just so satisfying to people today. There's no like, no, Joe, I need you to.
Don't encourage people to.
No. Oh, yeah. You're right. I won't do that.
You're going to tempt our listeners.
Oh, man. We got a lot of folks in Florida calling today. I'm glad.
Humid California,
but with no mountains. And they got alligators. But they have that beautiful warm water, Joe.
They do.
Have you gone in the water?
The water is much better on the East Coast than the West Coast. I mean no offense to anyone.
Dwayne in Orlando, Florida, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. We're glad to have you, Dwayne. Please go ahead with your question for Joe. He's on Florida time. He's getting there. Hi, Dwayne. Oh, wait! We gotta wait till he finishes going through the drive-through. All right, so let's go. We're going to Texas. We're going to come back to Dwayne, who is at the Del Taco right now. Juanita in Texas, listening on the EWTN app. You are next. I know you're there, Juanita. I can feel it.
I am. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Yes, so I have some family members that believe in the rapture and they're away from the church and they're trying to get me and my entire family out of the Catholic Church. And they claim that the early church is not the Catholic Church, that Constantine put together the Catholic Church in the 3rd century. So what information can I give them? And is there a list of the church fathers between the Acts of the Apostles and the 3rd century that I can give them? Or how can I help them?
I would be happy to send you a copy of my book. The early church was the Catholic Church. So let me tell you a little bit. So Constantine helps to legalize Christianity in the early 300s. He is not alive before 200. He had not been born yet I think he's born in 270. Maybe even later, I don't remember. But either way, he is, you cannot say he's the reason the church is Catholic in 200 because he doesn't exist yet and he's not a time traveler. So given all of that, the fact that we see the church is Catholic before 200 is a really convincing refutation that Constantine isn't the one who did it. that Jesus is. So in the book, I literally just look. I mean, sometimes I'll tiptoe a little bit past the 200 line, but I try to keep it to everyone before 200 and see what they believed on these issues. And you'll see they're incredibly Catholic. So the idea that Constantine changed church teaching, it's really silly. Like, Constantine wasn't even a baptized Christian until like his deathbed. And so the idea that he's changing church teaching, think about it this way. The Roman emperors had been trying to kill Christians pretty much the entire time Christianity existed. So the idea that they're going to just say, well, the emperor says we should believe X now, so let's go believe that, is a really bad historical theory. It's also a theory that has no historical evidence to support it. You're not going to find a church teaching that Constantine changes. It just isn't true. So I would just say, yeah, you can look at my book. You can also, if you want to just read the Church Fathers directly without any kind of help, Volume 1 of the Ante-Nicene Fathers is really early, and all of the volumes of the Ante-Nicene Fathers are before the Council of Nicaea in 325, and so all of them are going to be like up to Constantine.
Okay, and where do I find that information?
You can just look up. Philip Schaff has a large, like, multi-volume collection. All of it's available online. If you look up Schaff, SCHAFF, and then type in ANF for Ante-Nicene Fathers, you can find all of it. ccel.org has a full collection. I think you'll find, like, you can just read all of them directly there. New Advent also has a huge collection of the Fathers, but it doesn't have them sorted by date. And then I quote a bunch of the Fathers in the book that I'm going to send you, so hopefully that'll help as well.
Okay, Juanita?
Great. Yeah, that'll be like a studying point for me to go in that, because I would like to learn about the early church fathers to answer this question for them, because they're really adamant on getting us out of the Catholic Church.
Yeah,
And
I think it's a good thing to kind of press them on and try to get them to show you where they're getting this history from, because you'll find these claims all the time from people who've never taken a serious look at anyone from this era.
Great.
All right.
That's awesome.
Thanks, Juanita.
Thank you.
Hang on, and Sarah will get your information, and we will send you that. Let's go back to Dwayne in Florida, see if we've got Dwayne with us. Dwayne, you got a question for our guest, Joe Heschmeyer? Still no Dwayne, huh? I think we did one of those switcheroos on that line. I think Sarah's going to have to go back to that line. I think that's somebody else, not Dwayne anymore. That's my theory anyways. We better take a quick break. We'll be right back with more. It's open forum, really. You can ask anything. Joe Heschmeyer, right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
He is honored by the Church as one of the greatest enemies of clergy sexual abuse.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
In his time, St. Peter Damian fought against the many vices of contemporary clergy, especially sexual abuses among the clergy. In 1051, he wrote the Book of Gomorrah that is still considered essential reading for fighting abuse today. He died in 1072.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. The number 888-318-7884. It's open forum. Joe Heschmeyer, our guest this hour. 888-318-7885. Joe's got a course. Is it out now, Joe? The course on the World Religions course. It's out at the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics. I just want to mention that because, as Joe read so eloquently yesterday, more than 10,000 enrollments now. 10,000! That's how you read it. More than 10,000 enrollments. 10,000!
Yes, but it wasn't just, those are not 10,000 just for mine, but that'd be great.
No, at School of Apologetics, which is great because it's something that was a dream around here at Catholic Answers for a long time to kind of build a School of Apologetics. Jimmy Akin's leading the charge. And 11 courses up now, more to follow very shortly. Great deals over there right now. You can get a full-length course for $50. Get a mini course for $25. Visit shop.catholic.com and get started. Make sure you act now. This dynamite deal disappears at the end of the month.
That was very well read.
Thank you very much.
Mini course just makes me think of a school for ants.
just stop making jokes, Joe. You're not good at it. You're really good as an apologist, but you're not good at jokes.
I'm only okay as an apologist. Let's take the call.
James in Atlanta, Georgia, listening to EWTN, Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. We're glad to have you, James. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Yes. I guess my question has to do with spreading of the faith. So I guess most Catholics would agree the Bible is the most important book, but then the Catechism has got to be in the top 5 as far as most important books after that. So why isn't the Catechism of the Catholic Church in audiobook format? Now, I know that
Seriously, it's
the American bishops have put together a catechism, and I've listened to that whole catechism, and it wasn't the full catechism, and it wasn't nearly as good as the real catechism. So, and I've called EWTN asking for this book, and they said they don't know anything about it, and it doesn't exist.
James, I am
well, they do know something about it
to help tackle that question. I just want to say that's a really good question that I've wondered variations of. I'll even go a little further and say Father Mike Schmitz, Catholic priest extraordinaire, wanted to do a catechism in a year, like he did his very successful Bible in a year, just unpacking the catechism in the course of a year. You would think everyone would just say, this is brilliant. This would take the Catholic catechism and make it relatable for ordinary people. People eat this up, just like Catholics grew in biblical knowledge tremendously over the last year going through that, and a lot of people are going through it right now. And he ran into copyright issues, and it's really complicated.
You're kidding me.
I'm dead
really?
serious.
Come
And
on.
this is all public now, so I can share this. The issue is there's Italian copyrights, and then the English translations, there's an exclusive contract with the USCCB, and so they're trying to figure out how to preserve their the appropriate rights so people don't do terrible stuff with the catechism. They're worried about that, as if
people are going to do terrible things. They're going to do terrible things. Get over it.
So it's a really annoying and kind of complicated case. When you deal with the church and copyright, it's just really maddening. This is the second embarrassing church copyright case in the last 2 years. The other one involves the Vatican postage stamp, where they inadvertently violated the copyright of an Italian graffiti artist because they had digital rights to their graffiti. So
that's the most disappointing answer.
Oh, it totally.
Come on,
is bureaucratic nightmare. Please, if anyone at the USCCB is listening, call whoever you need to call, get the lawyers involved, and just let Father Mike rock everyone's world with the catechism. And of course, put the catechism in audiobook format too.
I'd like to apologize on the behalf of the entire church militant, James. I don't know why we don't have that. That's crazy. I'm sure that's not a very satisfying answer to you.
Well,
though.
let me throw out something. When God sends Gideon to go and defeat the Midianites, he assembles this huge army, and God says, no, your army is too big, and if you win, you're going to think it was because of your own strength. So he has him pare the army down in 2 ways. First, anyone who's afraid gets to go home. And second, he brings them down to the water, and people who drink water like normal people have to go home too. And only the couple hundred guys who drink water like dogs by lapping it up get to join Gideon's army. So Gideon's army is just
I'd be frank with you, I want that army too.
If
I'm going to build an army, I want a bunch of guys that drink like dogs.
Yes, the brave dog soldiers are the ones who are left. You just got to have a couple hundred. And so I think there's something analogous where God takes the least competent bureaucracies in the world, bases it in Rome, and then spreads the largest religion in the world. It's all of the ways you would never do a human enterprise. God chooses the weak of the world to shame the strong.
All right, James?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I mean, I can't believe that these copyright issues get in the way. By the way,
Copy wrong, right?
Catholic Answers Live is a production of Catholic Answers. Express written permission is requested or required before you reuse this broadcast in any form.
Don't air this during your Major League Baseball
Also,
games.
call the NFL. You
Yes.
can't use it unless you get permission from the NFL either. Elizabeth in Central California. Well, that's kind of big, Central California. Listening to also is Sirius Satellite Radio going crazy? Listening on channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. That's EWTN on Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Elizabeth, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hi. So I just went back to school to try to get a master's in psychology. One of my professors brought up a topic that I'm not very familiar of. It was the intersex, people that have or are intersex, And he said that the reason that we should have, or his thought was that we should have more than one sex, not just male and female, and that's why non-binary is important, is because of people that are intersex. And I just don't know how to go about this topic because something in me tells me that that's not right. But I want to come in a loving way, but also stay true to my Catholic faith. But I don't know how.
Yeah, Elizabeth, that's a great question. Let me unpack a little bit of kind of the science we're dealing with. First, you have the chromosomal level. Every individual either does or doesn't have a Y chromosome. If you have a Y chromosome, you are genetically male. Usually, that's XY. In rare cases like Klinefelter syndrome, you'll have an XXY. And then conversely, you can also have an XYY. But if you have a Y chromosome, you're male. If you don't, you're female. That's how it works scientifically. That's, we distinguish male and female animals. We distinguish male and female humans. That's not even religious. That's just science. But the genetic expression of that's going to be everything from like what your body looks like, including genitalia, all of that. That sometimes gets mutated. And so you'll have what's called ambiguous genitalia, where someone is born, it's not immediately obvious to the doctor whether the baby is a boy or girl, because things are kind of confusing. And so in those cases, doctors will often make a surgical intervention to create a more standard-looking set of organs down there. So this language, now notice, this is all a matter of sex. A boy or a girl baby looks unclear. There's not a third sex. It's just that some boys look more like girls, some girls look more like boys. And you can have a surgical intervention to try to make the child look more masculine or more feminine. In those cases, those are really hard, really difficult, and also really rare kind of cases. That's a totally different thing than gender. In the transgender kind of sense, that's someone who's clearly genetically male or genetically female wanting to be presented as the other gender. And in those cases, you're not dealing with intersex. You're dealing with gender expression, not even sexual expression. So those cases are just totally different. Now, a lot of that language has been imported to the transgender conversation. They'll say the sex assigned at birth, and all of that is scientifically untrue. Like a male and female baby, that's not something the doctor chooses at birth. You go and have a sonogram, and they can tell you, oh, you've got a boy, you've got a girl. You do a genetic test, they can tell you there's a boy or a girl. Those kind of things, So I would say the intersex thing is a difficult issue in terms of what do you do when a child's born, and should you have a surgical intervention? But even in those cases, there's actually a right answer. They either are a male or a female. They are a baby boy or a baby girl. It's sometimes just a little tricky to figure out because of deformity what the case is. Does that help? Those are really tricky cases, but I think people trying to argue for millions of transgender kids based on a tiny handful of legitimately intersex or ambiguous genitalia cases is a dishonest kind of bait and switch.
What do you think, Elizabeth?
I think it's just still a little bit confusing. Again, this is all new to me, but it's just, so I don't know how we could, I don't know how we could support people that are intersex, but that still think that they're neither. A female or a male.
So non-binary is different than intersex. Non-binary is a person who doesn't feel like they fit neatly into masculine or feminine categories, but they're not generally making that determination based on how they look. They're basing that determination based on other factors. They don't feel like a woman. They don't feel like a man. That's a psychological thing, and we should be supportive of that, and we should recognize that sometimes people have an overly restrictive sense of what it is to be a male, an overly restrictive sense of what it is to be a female. That there are things like tomboys. There are girls who like playing sports. Conversely, there are boys who like more traditionally feminine pursuits. As a kid, I was really heartened to learn that the samurai wrote some of the best poetry in Japanese history, right? Like, you don't have to fit into this super narrow box. And a lot of people consider themselves non-binary or transgender because they don't fit narrowly into that box. It's okay not to fit into that box. You're still a son or a daughter of God, as God made you. That's a different kind of thing than intersex. With intersex, the bigger issue is that they grow up believing they're one sex, and it turns out genetically they're not. Those are really complicated cases. They're also really rare, and a lot of times I think the individuals go through life without realizing that this surgery they had on themselves as kids just marred their genitalia in a way that was contrary to their genetics.
Elizabeth, do you want to follow up with any questions? Because we're about to take a break, but I can have you hang on if you want.
Yes.
Okay, hang on a quick second.
Last one, sorry.
No, please don't be sorry. These are things that we are very happy to have the opportunity to talk about. So you've given us a great opportunity. I know that many other people have similar questions or would at least like to hear what Joe has to say about this or what the church has to say about this. So we'll do that right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Tomorrow on More to Life, spiritual struggles.
Are challenges in your life impacting your faith? We'll help you find healing.
That's tomorrow on More to Life. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. We're continuing our conversation with Elizabeth, who's been working on her master's degree in psychology up there in Central California. We're glad to have you, Elizabeth. I can say on the air, and I can tweet this on Twitter, that dolphins are a sexually dimorphic species that reproduce sexually and therefore have male members and female members. But if I say human beings are a sexually dimorphic species who reproduce sexually and therefore have male and female members, I think I'd probably get kicked off Twitter. That's the way the world is now. Like, basic facts are no longer facts. We're not allowed to have those facts. I say all of that because Elizabeth goes to the university with goodwill to become a psychologist, going to help other people, or maybe write books or whatever she's going to do with her psychology degree. And then you encounter what is not education, but is nonsense. Nonsense like, it's all a big gradation. There's not two sexes. It's a big gradation or whatnot. Now, Elizabeth's very honest question, I think, is how do we respond to this with love and charity, especially to the person who expresses that I'm an intersex person, or I'm a non-binary person, or I'm a girl though I'm biologically male or whatever. I really love that question, but I do think, and this is why I want to just allow this conversation to go on with Elizabeth and not just hurry her off. There's a great deal of this that's not reasonable that is actually just bullying, and it's just
Not the word I thought you were about to say there when you said bullying.
It's actually just bullying. And, we were talking with Noelle Maring, and I don't know if we've even aired this interview we did with Noelle yet. So maybe I'm jumping the gun, but she told us it airs next week. Okay, so next week, go to Catholic Answers Focus, and we got this great interview with Noelle Maring, and she talked about watching CNN, and the CNN says, there's no scientific consensus on how to tell whether a baby is a boy or a girl at birth. And
I know one way.
Yeah. Let me just say this, because I said this to Noelle. We don't need a scientific consensus on this. Right. This is not a matter to be left to scientists. This is a matter that normal people, and really, I mean, who are the biologists that are going, I can't tell, it has all the male genitalia, but I can't tell.
I think
this is just sheer
biologists
bullying.
who will want not to lose their job.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's part of the bullying too, is that you got to go along with this, even though you know it's nonsense. All of this, Elizabeth, is by way of reintroducing you and asking you for your follow-up question. But I do think it is important to say, and I wanted to say it, but frankly, I just wanted to say it. A lot of this is just bullying. A lot of this is just, we can force you to say this, and we're going to force you to say this. So go ahead with your follow-up, Elizabeth.
Okay. So you said that they have, even my professor said that, when they're born, they have a procedure, surgery, to remove parts of the genitalia. And his position is that it's unfair and it's unjust and it's incorrect to do this to babies when they have no choice in the matter.
I actually agree with your professor on that one. We're talking about people who have indeterminate sexual organs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Intersex. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
that's a separate thing. I mean, I want to really stress that has nothing to do with transgenderism, even though it gets regularly brought into the debate. Those are really hard cases where, again, like they either are a boy or a girl, but it may be too early to tell because of some defect in some pre-birth defect that hopefully things will be clearer later on.
Yeah, and so I do think there's many doctors will say, and parents will say, and good ethicists will say, it's okay to wait, and we'll see what manifests itself by the age of 2 or 4 or 7, but and that's okay to wait on that.
Okay. Yeah, it's just being out of school and then going back. It's just a whole generation, like you said, a whole new doctrine that and it's hard. It's hard to try to stay strong in your faith when you feel alone.
Yeah, I would say trust your gut too.
Yeah.
Like if something sounds
gut.
really crazy, and like what Cy was pointing out, the fact that you could say this about dolphins and you can't say it about human beings, that tells you this is not an issue of the science. Because if you think about it, well, taking the transgender thing, which this is always adjacent to, why can't you say there are males and females? Well, because some males feel like females, some females feel like males. It's not a question of the body. The body is very clear in all but the intersex cases. It's usually a question that on the level of the soul, people don't feel in conformity with their body. Well, great. You've introduced the soul to science. And so now are we going to say, well, scientifically we have to believe in the soul so you can endorse this transgender ideology after decades of suggesting we can't believe in the soul? I mean, it shows that there really is kind of a silliness to this. And hopefully this is just a political thing that we'll move away from. I mean, a lot of this didn't begin in earnest until after the gay marriage debate, and we needed a new culture war to fight. And hopefully we'll find a new thing that we can fight about, and we'll move on and restore some sanity to the science.
Okay, Elizabeth?
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much.
Yes,
very helpful.
Thank you very much. And there are more and more people doing really fine work on this. So I would recommend you look into Noelle Maring's work, but also I know Word on Fire has tackled this. We've tackled it here at Catholic Answers, and not just Christian folks. I mean, J.K. Rowling has been tackling this. So I just my own sense is that this one goes too far. That sometimes we ask people to believe and do unreasonable things in the name of the sexual revolution, And I think this one goes too far, and it's not going to work. It's not going to take it. As a matter of fact, it's going to be very, very painful reckoning for society. Anything else for Elizabeth, Joe?
No, but I was going to say, how does Roland get down a hill walking? JK, Roland.
Oh my gosh! You have to stop it, Joe. Your jokes are terrible. Elizabeth, hang on the line. We'll send you a copy of Joe's book, "The Early Church Was the Catholic Church," just to make up for that horrible joke. I mean, most people are going, "Was that even a joke?" Just because you say it's a joke, it's like CNN. Just because they say it's the truth doesn't mean it is. Alex in Texas, you're next. Everyone's listening on Sirius Satellite Radio today. Alex in Texas, listening to EWTN. On channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Glad to have you, Alex. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hey, y'all can hear me, right?
Yes. Can. Yeah, we can.
Okay, just making sure. Hey, okay, so my question is, recently, if there was somebody who had been, let's say they were a Catholic, and they were a very militant Catholic at that, and but they were striving for tradition, and they read new things that get put out in the news about the restriction of certain traditional Latin masses and everything, and they were starting to more or less start to think about, well, is this really the right church? And they started reading about the Eastern Orthodox Church, i.e. the only other church that technically can trace its roots back. Mm-hmm. Is there any type of good information you could give that person to say, no, this is why Roman Catholicism or even, Eastern Rite Catholicism is correct?
Yeah,
It seems like nowadays amongst traditionalists, like myself too, get so caught up in the divine liturgy that they get swayed into Eastern Orthodoxy. And so I was just wondering if there are any good references I can pull from.
Yeah, that's a great question. The first question I would ask, Alex, is which Orthodoxy? Because right now there's a huge schism going on between Byzantine Orthodox and Russian Orthodox. About 2/3 of the Orthodox population is Russian, and they have excommunicated the Ecumenical Patriarch, who on paper is the highest patriarch in Orthodoxy. He just doesn't have the same amount of political power as the Russian ones. And this is all crazy Ukrainian politics impacting Orthodox ecclesiology. And on paper also, they recognize that the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, is primus inter pares, the first among equals, and that he has a primacy of honor. Historically, honor there didn't just mean like you got to wear a cool hat or something. Honor meant authority. So you would have, the same way you might say your honor to the judge. You're not saying like cool robes, you're recognizing an actual official office and authority. So the primacy of honor recognized that the Pope was number one, and then the Patriarch of Constantinople is number two. Right now, 2/3 of Orthodox are out of communion with both number one and number two. That's a problem, right? So the which Orthodoxy question is really good, I think, to ask, to just tease out how incoherent Orthodox ecclesiology is right now. Second, if you say, how many ecumenical councils are there and what makes an ecumenical council, you'll find the Orthodox don't have a clear answer to that question. Most say 7, some say 8, some say 9. And why isn't the Robber Council a council would be another good question to ask. The reason it's not a council is the Pope said no to it. And the Orthodox trusted the Pope no over the proceedings of what appeared to be an ecumenical council. All of that, if you get into the history of that, succinctly points to the need for the Pope, and that if you don't have the Pope, you don't even know which ecumenical councils you do and don't have. The Orthodox have never had a binding ecumenical council after they broke away from Rome. We've had numerous ones. We're up to 23 now. They're stuck at 7, 8, or 9, and they don't know. So I would say all of those things, just historically speaking, point to the fact that there's a reason the Pope had the role of the Pope prior to 1054. And then in terms of good resources in an ongoing kind of way, Michael Lofton with Reason and Theology is a convert from Orthodoxy to Catholicism. I think he does some good work. He regularly has good guests as well. The books that I'm thinking of, Romanides is really kind of a controversial author in terms of like Catholic Orthodox apologetics, but I know that there are people who do that stuff, but I'm not as familiar with good book resources. But I think Lofton would be a good guy, and he's also someone you could reach out to ask for good resources as well.
Alex, got to leave it there because it's break time. We'll take this break. More calls coming up. If you're on the line, stay on the line. We're coming right back with Joe Heschmeyer, Open Forum, Catholic Answers Live.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Hey, this is Michael O'Neill, the Miracle Hunter. I'll be delving into the fascinating world of miracles and taking you on a hunt that explores the greatest mysteries and marvels of the Catholic Church. I'll be examining what constitutes a miracle, how miracles are investigated and approved, and the role they play in the lives of the faithful. We'll look at the miracles of the Gospels and early Christianity, considering the claims of the miraculous in our own modern age.
The Miracle Hunter, Saturday at 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
A lot of people think that street evangelization involves yelling out of a bullhorn telling people that they're going to hell. Not so with St. Paul's Street Evangelization. Our methods are non-confrontational and effective. We simply offer information on the Catholic faith along with rosaries, miraculous medals, and prayer. Pope Francis wrote about how beautiful it is to see street preachers joyfully bringing Jesus to every corner of the earth. Street evangelization is fun and fruitful. Join us today at streetevangelization.com.
I don't know what you just said to me. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I don't know what's going on in there in the booth. I don't know. Was that? It was a private conversation Joe and I were just having. Did that just go out over the air? Okay. All right.
It was about Canada.
It was about Canada and Russia and America. And weight loss. 888-318-7884 is the number here. Let's go to Denise in Columbus, Georgia, watching on Facebook. I don't know why I'm relieved that this is not from Sirius XM satellite radio. I was starting to feel an oppressive quality to that. Denise, go ahead with your question for Joe.
Yes, I have a friend that their family's Baptist. Her mother passed away last week, and she donated her body to science. How does the Catholic Church feel about that? And also about donating your organs after you pass away?
Yeah, those are really good questions and somewhat controversial questions. There's a few levels to the question. First, we need to treat the body with respect, and that includes the bodies of the dead. This is Catechism paragraph 2300. And that's because we don't think of the body as something you use and then discard, but as something lasting that will rise again in a glorified state. Now, that belief does not contradict organ donation in the same way that even right now, you can donate your non-vital organs. You know, if you've got 2 kidneys, you can give away 1. That's not disrespectful towards your body if you're doing it out of like a love for another person. Now, if you did it for a bad reason, you know, you just hate your kidney for some reason, that would be a bad reason.
That would be bad. I hope that doesn't start now that you've said it.
I don't want to start.
I think it's better just to
TikTok
not say
craze.
some things. Yeah, right. I hate my kidney.
You thought the Tide Pod thing was bad. Wait till you get kidney removal.
Yeah.
Those, you know, if you did it out of a disrespect for the body, or if you did it out of a belief that the body was just over and done with at death, that would be contrary to the Christian belief in the resurrection of the dead and the goodness of the body. On the other hand, of course, that's not why most people are doing things like donating body parts to science. There is a second level of concern as well, which is whether you're actually dead. That for vital organ donation, they want the body before decomposition is set in, before everything kind of shuts down. And sometimes they will prematurely declare a person dead before they actually are. And that's a serious moral problem, because when you take a person who's alive and you make them not alive by removing their vital organs, that's murder in these cases. So we're against murder. So you don't want a situation where, you know, you need to really trust that the person actually is dead. This raises all sorts of questions about brain death and declarations of death. There was a case, I remember a few years ago in Oklahoma, where a person who'd been declared dead made a full recovery. I've known people who they wanted to remove organs from who recovered. So you got to be careful about like who's making the determination of death. But that's, just another kind of level of concern. Accounting for that, if you're not doing it out of disrespect for the body, and if the person is actually dead, then you can morally licitly donate organs, and you can morally licitly donate your body to science out of an act of love to try to help other people in this way that you can only do upon death.
Now, Denise, did that help you out?
Yes, definitely, because I'm a cradle Catholic, and I have never heard this addressed.
I'm glad you've done it.
Yeah, well, good. I'm sure many other people were interested as well, so thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good night.
You too.
You
Thank
too.
you. No, I'm gonna say Lull in Missouri, watching on YouTube. Is that right? Lull?
Yeah, this is Lowell.
Oh, Lowell.
Yes.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Lowell, go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hey, first of all, if I could, I just want to say I appreciate all you do. I've been listening on YouTube for years. I don't consider myself a Catholic. I just love sweet Jesus, and I love the Bible.
Amen.
And where I'm at is it says, "Be ye holy." So I just try and be holy. If I could preface this, I follow Geno Jennings and his teachings, so I just had a couple quick questions. I don't need a long answer or anything, but he taught that the Catholic believed that Jesus' flesh is in heaven, his flesh and blood, and we know in Corinthians it says that no flesh will inherit it. And then my next question would be that the Catholics say Mary is the mother of God, and surely God doesn't have a mommy. And then my last point is, when people calling with questions, how come you just don't go right to the Bible? Like the young lady earlier that was bisexual or whatever she was saying, you could go to the Bible. I was just curious. These are honest questions, and I'll end it with this. And I'm going to keep listening for years to come, and I appreciate all you do. But like the woman earlier, if you could just tell her it's an abomination, I just wonder why you don't go right to the Bible. And that's all I have. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, no, thank you for very
Thank you,
good
Lowell,
questions.
and thank you for referring
These
to.
are on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, they sound
These are
honest, brother.
honest
And you
questions.
referred to sweet Jesus, and that makes me so happy to hear a brother refer to the Lord that way. So it all came across as very honest, Lowell, and we'll see what Joe has to say about these three questions.
I'm going to answer them in reverse order because that's the order I remember them in. So firstly, why don't we answer just with the Bible verse? On a question like intersex and indeterminate genitalia and like medical conditions like that, she's not asking, is it okay for someone to be bisexual? She's asking about like really complicated medical questions. And so I gave her a medical answer. When people ask a biblical question, I try to give them a biblical answer. So in the same way, if someone wanted to know, like, what's the forecast tomorrow? I'm not going to be like, what does James have to say about that? Or, I'm going to, consult the appropriate sources. Faith and reason are both gifts of God. Second, in terms of the mother of the Lord, you're the mother of God.
God, yeah.
Yeah. So in Luke 1:43, I'll give you a biblical answer. Elizabeth greets Mary by saying, "Why is this granted to me that the mother of my Lord should come to me?" Well, Lord there is how the Jews spoke of God when we talk about Jesus as Lord and God. So if Jesus is Lord and Mary's his mother, she's the mother of the Lord. If Jesus is God and Mary's the mother, she's the mother of God. In saying that, we're not saying she created God, and we're not saying she's the mother of the God the Father, we're not saying she's the mother of God the Holy Spirit. Just as when we say that Jesus is God, we're not saying Jesus is the Father, and we're not saying Jesus is the Holy Spirit. So if we can say Jesus is God, even though he's not the Father, then we can say Mary is the mother of God, even though she's not the mother of God the Father. What do you think of that?
Oh, hang on. I put him on hold.
Oh, I'm
Apologize.
sorry.
Lowell, go ahead. What do you think?
That is the greatest answer I have ever heard. And hey, once again, I want to say I appreciate all you do. But my only thing is, and I'm trying to wrap my mind around it, and I have another Bible verse, and this is what I'm studying. It says, "Great is the mystery that God," and I don't know it word for word. I'm sure you do. God come in the flesh.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know where I'm talking. Okay, so I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this. And through my stupid YouTube, I don't want to be like everybody else and watch dumb videos. So I at least try and focus. I read the Bible and I do this. But these were just some questions I have that you guys, the Catholic Church says, "Hail Mary, mother of God.
Yeah.
So when I think of that, anybody thinks of the mother, they would have to be there before God.
Yes.
And I believe Jesus is God.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm, you know,
But that's what we
how do
mean.
you say it?
Yeah.
Pray for me to understand what you're saying, because I'm going to be watching to understand. I'm going to hang up so you can get somebody else.
Well, wait a second.
Wait,
Hang on, Larry.
you just have one more question I hadn't
I thought
answered
there was
yet.
a question that didn't get answered, and it's bothering me.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's about the flesh and blood inherited.
All your time.
Yeah, well,
Okay,
no.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks,
Yeah.
Lowell.
Go ahead.
Okay, so in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul clarifies what he means. When he talks about flesh and blood not inheriting the kingdom, he's not literally saying we're not going to have bodies, because we clearly believe in the resurrection of the body. This is taught over and over in Scripture, including, again, in 1 Corinthians 15. But he talks about the physical body is raised as a spiritual body. The example there is Christ's resurrection from the dead. We know he rises in a bodily form because, you know, for instance, in John 20, he has Thomas touch his side. He eats in the Gospel of Luke in the resurrection account. So he does these clearly bodily things, and he distinguishes himself from a ghost in, I believe it's John 21, when the apostles think that he's a ghost walking on the water. That we know that he's not a ghost. We know that he actually is bodily risen from the dead. That Paul gives the analogy in 1 Corinthians 15 to a seed that grows into a plant. That it's still the seed, but it's the seed all grown up and transformed in this incredible way. He gives like a kernel of wheat or another grain that grows into like a full-grown wheat. It's still the same thing, but it's all grown up and it's transformed. That transformation isn't an annihilation of the seed, just like the bodily resurrection isn't an annihilation of the body. It's a transformation and the fulfillment of what the body was always meant to be. So in terms of Christ being raised up flesh and blood into heaven, yeah, that's clearly described in Acts 1 with the ascension of Christ. And of course, that's a continuation of the resurrection, that Christ bodily raises from the dead. And I think I would ask your pastor, if he doesn't believe that, well, where's Jesus' body? Can you show me, like, well, where's he buried? Or where could I find him? And I think the answer is very clearly the tomb is empty. That's what we're hearing proclaimed in Acts 2. And why is it empty? Because Jesus' flesh and blood is in heaven.
Lowell, I'm going to leave it there because we have one more caller, and I don't want to leave this caller without an answer. So thank you. Call back anytime. Appreciate the question, or the questions. Lewis in Seattle, Washington, watching on YouTube. If you can ask the question quickly, Joe can get you an answer, Lewis.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, quick question. I can listen to the answer off the air. If endogamy is genetically problematic, how do we understand, or how do we explain a whole human race coming of two persons?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Lewis. That was great. Joe?
Yeah, I would say a lot of...
We can't.
Yeah, it's kind of, the early days are gross. I don't know another way to say that. Like when you have near relatives, and likewise after the Great Flood, and likewise in kind of catastrophic situations that have happened in human history since then, when you have a small group of people, there's going to be intermarriage, there's going to be marriage of near relatives, and occasionally that does lead to genetic disorders or diseases and those sort of things. Now, pretty quickly, you have an exponential growth in the population in terms of human history. And so this is only a potential issue for the first few generations. And then people start to be, once you're second cousins and further, the genetic risks are actually very low.
Frankly, even for cousins.
Yeah, frankly, I don't want to go on record of advocating cousin marriage.
No, but as far as genetics go,
yeah.
There's almost no risk.
It's true.
Cousins marrying cousins. Lewis, man, you did a great job. Why don't you hang on? We'll send you a copy of Joe's book, The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, because you wouldn't believe, Lewis, how many times I say, if you can ask your question quickly, we can get you an answer, and the person can't. They say, okay, I'm going to be quick, and then they start like this. My grandmother was born in Germany. And I'm like, nah, if you're starting with where your grandmother was born, this is not going to be quick. I'm pretty sure it's not. Would you want to say something, Joe?
Well, just said, you talked about how important it was to be quick and then told a long story about people being slow.
It's because you both did such a good job. I had a few seconds, Joe. Is there any way we can get Joe not to be on the show Friday? I know we've got a schedule for Friday, but
We'll see if Si's successful. Friday first hour.
Friday first hour. Yes, tune in to see if I was able to get rid of Joe. Joe Heschmeyer, apologist extraordinaire, and also just a wonderful guy. He's got a brand new book. The early church was the Catholic Church, the Catholic witness of the fathers in Christianity's first 2 centuries. Get it wherever good books are sold, but get it for $4 off right now at shop.catholic.com. Joe Heschmeyer, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
You want to know something cool?
What's that?
Jesus Christ is the light of the nations.
Amen, brother.
We'll see you next time, God willing, right here, Catholic Answers Live.